You mentioned Project 2025. I mean, Heritage Foundation, AFPI, these groups that have been putting together some playbooks. Do you think that will have an impact and sort of infiltrate some of the policies coming from the administration?
President Trump's administration this time is 10 times more prepared than when we came in the first, because we were kind of a come from behind victory. As you remember, we didn't have a lot of time to think through transition. There wasn't that deep bench of players that believed in President Trump's philosophy. So not only is President Trump the most powerful individual politically in Washington, he also now has a true army in back of him of people that have spent years thinking through policies, of people that have worked together for years and are prepared now next Monday to hit the beach. And I think you see it right now, what I call the flood the zone concept in the confirmations this week. You're going to see people that are coming together that have great backup, have thought through policy, are prepared to hit a relatively hostile confirmation process, both from a little bit from establishment Republicans, but particularly the Democrats. And I just think, I call it days of thunder. I think people are not prepared right now, particularly the political press, of how intense this is going to be, but this is years in the making.
Welcome to the Ken Harbaugh Show. Joining me today is David Pepper, former chair of the Ohio Democratic Party, an old friend, and the inspiration behind this new podcast series, Trump's Project 2025, Up Close and Personal. David, I want to get into how this came about, but I've listened to the first couple episodes, and it's really good, but it listens and it reads kind of like a true crime podcast, because it kind of is, right? Trump and his enablers have pulled off the biggest con in American political history, maybe in American history. And as you point out, people are going to die because of Project 2025, whether it's vaccinations or women's health care. What drove you to lay this out during the election, and how did this podcast series come to be?
What's funny is, so you may know, some of your listeners may know, before I started writing nonfiction books about the state of democracy in Ohio and beyond, I wrote fiction, sort of political thrillers. And I read a lot of both fiction and nonfiction. And my first thought was sometimes actually storytelling, or often storytelling of a fictional type, has more impact on a listener or on a reader than just the nonfiction presentation. And as Project 2025 started to get released last year, kind of like when everyone said, read the Mueller report and read this or read Jack Smith's thing, I thought, no one's going to read that. We need to make it real for people. And so my goal was to be very, faithful to what is laid out in Project 2025, or what was a consistent part of Trump's stump speeches, or later what J.D. Vance talked about, and try and say, well, if they're going to actually do these things, this is what it would look like. So my goal wasn't to just make stuff up. It was to actually say at the end of each chapter is a month, each podcast episode is a month, I actually cite, here's where I'm getting this from. They're saying it, they're promising it, they're saying it consistently, or they took the time to write it down in Project 2025. And, I wrote something this morning that we can talk about this, what they said about getting rid of experts and independent folks through this thing called Schedule F is exactly what they're already doing around the NSC. They're already vetting or inquiring into the personal views of national security staffers, just like they said they would in Project 2025. And so a lot of these chapters, I hate to say it, my March chapter is literally about the bird flu arriving at the very moment where they are replacing scientists with hacks. Like, it's actually going to happen. So the point was to try and frankly dramatize it so people take it seriously. Obviously, Trump won. So in that way, I guess it didn't work. But in some ways, I hate to say it, it's almost more relevant now, because I worry what's going to happen. I know I'm talking for a while. My worry is we're going to get, what do they call? They're going to rush everything so quickly that we can't even keep up with it. And so part of what this tries to do is explain, what does a mass deportation approach look like? What does Schedule F look like? So even if the media can't keep up with it, what I'm trying to do is make it real for people, because I do think a lot of these things, not every one of them, are going to play out as they proposed.
I think it's inevitable that they are going to rush through as much of this as possible. You see it already with the nominees. And I get the feeling in a really ominous way that what Democrats are doing, I watched the Hegseth hearings, the Bondi hearings, they are just preserving for the historical record why we tried to stop this. There really isn't much hope using the legislative levers of power of stopping this juggernaut. A lot of what's in Project 2025 is going to come to pass, but we need to be clear-eyed and loud in declaring that this is wrong and Americans are going to pay the price for it. And even if some of it's inevitable, we're going to speak out.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing on that is not all of it is going to be unpopular. But when people start to see, and I have a chapter on what happens to, working families in Pennsylvania if they do the labor tax that they spell out. I have a chapter on what will happen if they truly get rid of the Department of Education and replace funding for schools in need, be they rural or urban, with vouchers that go to basically the most well-off families in suburbs. I spell that out, and here's why it's also important that we lay all this stuff out there. Because if people see this stuff, it's actually really unpopular. It's the way we could win in 26 if it all goes by so quickly and we don't take the time to say, the reason your local school is now charging you $1,000 to play football is because the money is going to a private school to mainly pay for families that were already going to that private school, or the attack on your wages or your pension or the way they're screwing you over on overtime is because of what they're doing. The truth is, if we do that right, that bill or mass deportation and tariffs have skyrocketed your grocery prices, including eggs. You add all that up, and all of a sudden, that also isn't just the record, but it's also the materials that smart people running for office in 25 and 26 can use to show people they're being screwed, maybe by the person they voted for, maybe by the state rep or congressman they voted for. So let's turn it around real quick as soon as 26. If we let all this fly by and don't point that out, we actually might lose some opportunities to point out just how flawed a lot of their policies are and how much everyday people are going to pay the price for those policies.
Hey everyone, it's Ken. As much as I love and appreciate all of you and how much you care about politics and the future of this country, I understand that sometimes you just need a break. We all do. Well, I could not be more excited to partner with Forward Retreats to tell you about an upcoming writing retreat for anyone who wants to dive deep into the stories that make us who we are. And trust me, you will come back enriched and fulfilled and ready. So join two fantastic award-winning writing coaches, Anne-Marie Kelly and Phyllis Biffle-Elmore, in France this fall. We all have stories in our pockets about love and loss, heartache and grief. Let Phyllis and Anne-Marie help you put your stories on the page. Come together with a community of other writers and aspiring writers to search for answers and dismantle the roadblocks that stand in your way. What is the heart of your story? Why are you the only one who can tell it? You'll begin each morning writing in the seaside village of Arcachon, southwest of Bordeaux. Every afternoon, you'll be free to create, relax, and explore, and commune with fellow travelers. At the heart of this retreat is the practice of writing as a form of healing. This once-in-a-lifetime retreat is for women of all ages and experiences who long to write achingly beautiful prose in a transcendently beautiful place. You can find out more at forwardretreats.com, and be sure to include the code 25AK for $900 off this amazing writing retreat. That's code 25AK for $900 off. If you've ever longed to put your story on paper and just needed the right excuse and the right coaches, join this amazing team in Seaside, France this summer. Click the link in the show notes to learn more. Thanks. How confident are you in Democrats' ability to message these things? Because we had strong arguments in 24 as well, really strong arguments. I mean, one of the most frustrating things for me is that Trump is inheriting a pretty great economy. He's inheriting policies that really supported working families. He's going to take credit for all of it, even as he tries to dismantle it.
Right.
But we don't seem, at least at the national level, to be able to communicate effectively either what the other side is doing to hurt average Americans or what we're doing to help them.
You know, it's a fair question. Do you know who I'm most confident? I'm most confident when people like you run in the community you live in. And so my hope, which you did, my hope is that the first step is to say, we got to start getting more people running in the places that we haven't run much or we haven't supported people enough so they can make enough noise. I think the candidates on the front lines will, in the end, be more attuned to those frustrations, to those needs. Maybe they're the 20-year history teacher, or like you, a veteran from the community. I think I have more confidence in the candidates getting it right than maybe the highest level of politics in DC. So my philosophy is just make sure we're running a lot of places and make sure we support candidates in those runs and let them direct a lot of their messaging because they'll know it best in their community. I think that, and let's also be smart enough to learn from what just happened. You said we had good numbers in many ways economically, but clearly it didn't translate down on the ground. And we better be humble about that. Every time I see, well, we had this great data. Well, if we didn't win the election, then we did something wrong. So trust candidates, get them out there running in more places than we normally run. Don't just run in a few places where we know we're going to win. That's not getting to all of America. And then let's dig hard about what about our messaging failed to translate to everyday folks, and do that because we know that I believe, Trump's policies, and you know this from Ohio, Ohio's economy was already losing jobs in 2019 because of Trump's policies. Before COVID ever hit, we lost jobs January of 19 to January 20. So he's going to do the same policies now, but actually think even worse. And we're going to see impacts on everyday people. So we have to be in the position by running and having taken a deep dive of how we're communicating, how we talk on podcasts, how we get out there in different ways, because I think there's going to be an opportunity if we've done that work to take advantage of the pain, sadly, that Trump's going to inflict on people who may, again, even have voted for him or maybe didn't vote because they didn't think we were going to solve their issues. So we better be prepared for it. And then we better be on the ground, on the front lines, messaging. And I do think it's back to basics about how these policies are impacting everyday lives, whether it be, joblessness actually going up, prices going up, schools being. I think public education is a huge opportunity for us. Their policies on public schools, if people understand them, are absolutely as unpopular as it gets. I visited Kentucky a few days after the election. In Kentucky, by 2-1, the voters of Kentucky rejected vouchers for their state. Counties that voted 80-20 for Trump, small rural counties, voted 76-24 against vouchers because they don't want their local school decimated by sending money off to a private school 100 miles away they'll never go to. That's the kind of issue we have to communicate all over the state. We haven't done that as well as we should. But once Trump's policies start showing what he's going to actually do to these communities, I think there'll be an opportunity to really message well if we're on the ground doing it effectively.
We've got to find a way to assign the blame for that kind of thing to Trump and MAGA, because this happens again and again and again. We have these great local candidates who win on local issues, but national politics and cultural issues and just the momentum of MAGA and Trumpism seem to overtake that local frontline messaging. It does feel like every election, even school board elections, have become nationalized.
They have, but if you look at the last couple of years, we succeeded outside of when Trump was on the ballot.
Yeah.
So I think in 25 and 26, that opportunity will come again, that without him on the ballot, it doesn't get as national. Like the national implications of those policies will play out locally, point those out. But the national sort of fever pitch that clearly happens when Trump's on the ballot in states like we know well, like Ohio, doesn't happen as much. And I think that's when at the school board level and at the state house level, which are in many ways the first opportunity to fight back. Karl Rove fought back first after Obama won by sweeping state houses in 2010. Howard Dean fought back beginning in 2005, 50-state strategy. That's sort of the first barometer. And that should be our attitude in 25 and 26. And in those years, not only do we know there's a historic backlash against the party of power, but I also think we've seen lately that fewer people are showing up on the Trump side in those elections, Look at what happened to Mehmet Oz or Herschel Walker. People didn't show up for them. So I think that's the level where we can fight back. These are probably good years to fight back if history tells us anything. But I also think the repercussions of these top-down oligarch-style policies on schools, on wages, on overtime, on the economy overall, I think that'll actually be pretty clear by late 25, 26, how much these policies are hurting everyday people. So my hope is that it's going to be a tough week, like you said. It's going to be a tough couple months. There's a lot coming. But if we're prepared, I think there's actually an opportunity to fight back as well.
Well, David, great having you on the show. Where can people tune in to Trump's Project 2025 up close and personal?
The best thing is I just posted about today. If you can get on any of your podcasts, if you want to listen to a podcast, it's called Trump's Project 2025 up close and personal. I'm also active on Substack at David Pepper. I link to it there, and I'm active on Twitter at David Pepper and Blue Sky as well, by the way. But if you look up Trump's Project 2025, by the way, it wasn't just me. A group of us put it together. And really the coolest part is that a bunch of really high-profile actors and actresses are part of it. Richard Schiff from The West Wing.
Yep. Mark Hamill.
We got all sorts, some really, really good, Wendell Pierce from all sorts of great shows. They're all reading these chapters. So they're really well done. It's Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker. Literally, you'll appreciate this one. He reads the story of what it feels like to be a soldier being asked to crack down on domestic protests and the hell of that assignment if it happens. So we have a lot of really talented people reading these chapters, which it makes it a lot more interesting than even if you just read it. So I hope people will tune in.
Yep, we'll put links in the show notes. Dave, great having you. Appreciate it.
Great talking to you. Take care.
Later.
See ya.